Okay, so I will be introducing our keynote speaker. It's a true pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Michele Anciaux Aoki, whom I met when I taught in Washington State a few years ago. I still remember her unstoppable energy, and we're really delighted to have her as our speaker today. Dr. Anciaux Aoki is an international education and world languages advocate. She previously served as World Languages Program Supervisor at the Washington State Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Oopsie, I'm gonna, oh dear.
Everything okay?
Yes, I'm gonna try to switch my to my T-Mobile hotspot just in case I lose internet here. So I may be gone for a second.
Okay. So I'll continue. So she developed the World Languages Competency-Based Credit Program that laid the foundation for the Washington State Seal of Biliteracy. She also served as International Education Administrator for Seattle Public Schools, responsible for 10 international schools with dual language immersion programs in Spanish, Japanese, and Mandarin Chinese. Michele has served as Program Director and Consultant to the University of Washington StarTalk Russian and Portuguese Heritage Language Programs since 2011 and coordinated the annual Heritage Language Symposium. In 2020 and 21, she developed and managed an innovative state heritage language grant for Romanian, Russian, and Spanish heritage language students to earn the Global Competence Certificate and Global Seal of Biliteracy. Currently, Michele volunteers with the Washington Association for Language Teaching Testing Team and serves as Advocacy Chair for the National Council of State Supervisors for Language and on the Advisory Board of the Global Seal of Biliteracy. She holds a doctorate in Slavic linguistics from the University of Washington and has received 2 leadership awards from WAFL, the Washington Association for Language Teaching, the Consul General Award from the Consul General of Japan, and in 2021, the Outstanding Contributions to the Teaching of World Languages in the Pacific Northwest Award from the Pacific Northwest Council for Languages. But most recently, 2 days ago on February 3rd, Michele was selected for the J. David Edwards Power of Advocacy Award from the Joint National Committee for Languages. This award recognizes extraordinary advocacy efforts carried out at the individual, local, state, regional, national, or international level that contribute to the JNCL-NCLIS mission and serves to expand access to languages other than English. The award will highlight exemplary advocacy initiatives and inspire others as they work in passionate pursuits of common goals. Please join me in congratulating Michele for all of her achievements and in welcoming her today. Thank you, Michele.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I just should warn that I do sometimes lose internet. I'm down in Florida right now, taking care of my granddaughter who's 15 months old. So I'm getting the Saturday off to do this. So hopefully everything will go smoothly. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Alejandro, I just want to say, has been an inspiration and a great partner on, especially in the early years when we were doing the Heritage Language Symposium at the University of Washington, which I'll be mentioning shortly. I did put in the chat a link to a tiny URL note-taking place so we can be a little bit interactive here as we have this conversation today. And I'm so honored, Maria, to be invited to be here, especially this is kind of a big inaugural event for your amazing endeavor that you're starting here. So let's get started. Let's see. Okay, so today what I'm going to be sharing is a bit about our experience in Washington with the Global Competence Certificate for Heritage Language Learners, engaging students in meaningful content for global literacy. And so to start with, I just want to, let's see, find for one thing. Okay, there we go. Start with some questions. This actually, I originally posed these questions in 2020, in the middle of summer of COVID, right? For a WAFL webinar, because we had just applied for this grant. And so I wanted to share what we were thinking of doing. So I'm going to give you the kind of the whole journey from where we started from and thinking about how this might work. to what we actually accomplished in the first year of the grant, and now we are moving into the second year of the grant. So there's a series of questions that really came from our experience of 7 years of University of Washington Heritage Language Symposia, and Maria was certainly a presenter there a number of times, and Alejandro as well. And then our challenge, of course, then was how to do something with these ideas that we had teaching remotely because we were in the middle of COVID. It turned out that was actually a plus for our desire. So I'm going to, this is a page where you can link to any of these heritage language symposia. We do have usually resources, PowerPoint, sometimes recordings from a lot of them over the years. And I just have to say, this is a great example of just start somewhere. We kind of looked among ourselves and what we had learned from coming down to the National Heritage Language Research Institute and just sharing what we learned. And then we brought speakers and held these year after year. And our next one is coming up next Saturday. So if you're not too tired from today, please feel free to come and join us. And Maria Carrera will be back too. So that's great. So the first question really that we had to think about is, who is a heritage language learner? And I'm sure that you all talked about that in session 2, in room 2, because we talked about that a lot of places. So there is a spot where you can put some notes in that Google Doc if you're inclined to do that, but no obligation, since I think everyone here today is probably pretty clear on that. But remember, back in 2014, when we were getting started, we really needed this definition, this clarity, because often what you would hear, say, in the dual language arena was that all of these children that were Spanish speakers, half of them, well, I should say, you would visit a dual language program and they would say, oh, it's a two-way program. Half the people are native speakers of Spanish and half are English. And then I'd go walk around the tables and I'd see the name tags and they all look Hispanic names. And they say, oh, well, half of them are native, but others kind of prefer Spanish or prefer English, for example. And meanwhile, we had classes where the kids all had English sounding names, but it turned out they were half Japanese or half Mandarin, half Chinese or something like that. So it was really important to work on that, the distinction between the narrow definition and the cultural affinity, broader definition from Polinsky and Kagan. So going with that idea, what can we do to attend to the needs of heritage language learners? In other words, what do they need? So some highlights from our 2015 Heritage Language Symposium when Maria came the first time. She suggested some things, and again, you can add notes if you'd like to in that Google Doc. Know your learners, the rich classroom discourse, they have to be active and autonomous partners, differentiate, all those things that I'm sure all of you here today are already well aware of. How can project-based learning meet the needs of heritage language learners? And again, we brought back in 2018, this is actually at Hamilton International Middle School. There was some kind of demonstration happening at the UW campus. And so the campus was closed, and Brandon, who's here today, Brandon Severance, was a dual language Spanish teacher here at Hamilton. So he arranged like overnight practically for us to go to his school. And we had a wonderful day with Maria presenting on this. And so we talked about what are the key principles, how do you apply those to heritage learners and so on. So these are all things that were kind of percolating for us that we'd learned over the years. How do we bring this forward? What do we mean by project-based learning? That idea of learner-centered, it takes a period of time, it's complex issues, real-life challenges, and there's a product. So these were all things that I was thinking about for this grant that I will tell you about shortly. How can we challenge heritage language learners to step outside their comfort zone? This is something that we talked about in a presentation from our Star Talk team, actually in 2019 at our Heritage Language Symposium. We actually had an article that we co-authored in the Language Educator as well. We are able to get our heritage language speakers to advanced level, even in writing for a large percentage of them, through our summer Star Talk program. It's about 100 hours, 24 weeks in Russian. And one summer we also did Portuguese, which was really interesting because half the students were Portuguese heritage speakers and half were Spanish, who were strong speakers and readers and writers of Spanish and could use Spanish as an entree into Portuguese. So we did this article together. And some of what we learned from that about getting them out of their comfort zone is that we needed to use project-based learning, but we also need to make sure to provide enough time for students to bond, to use this global competence matrix that you may have heard about. That's part of this work on global competence. Asia Society has led a lot of that work. I was originally part of the team that developed the matrix in 2010, but also promote a collaborative and positive atmosphere, not so much about competition, and take advantage of the individual strengths of each group. And that was really clear when we had Portuguese heritage speakers and Spanish heritage speakers learning together, and support self-directed learning. So all of these ideas informed our idea for the plan for this program that we proposed. So another question, how can we use the heritage language as the medium of instruction, not the target? So that really came a lot from our 2019 Heritage Language Symposium keynote by Eva Zizek. And she talked about how schooling and literacy give individuals a very different experience about their heritage language. And so it's really important for them to get extra high quality input in their formal schooling or in a program like this, give them a wider range of grammatical constructions. They just need a lot more input in order to tailor and further develop their output as well. So all of those things kind of got summarized as this. We wanted to recognize who heritage language learners are in all their beautiful complexity and meet them where they are, make their learning meaningful, engaging, and accessible, make them active and autonomous learners, use project-based learning, challenge them to get out of their comfort zone, and use the heritage language as the medium of instruction to get extra high quality input. So what happened next? We needed to figure out how to do these things remotely. We knew we could do a lot of those things in our summer Start Talk programs because we'd done it for almost 10 years with Russian and that 1 year with Portuguese. And so when you have the students in hand, when you've carefully nurtured your teachers to understand the best principles to make effective teaching, you've got an intense program of 6 hours a day, basically, partnerships with the Museum of Flight. All those things were clearly going to be possible, but how could we do it now in a school year program that was going to be supported by a grant from the state of Washington? So we decided that we would focus in on having the students have the opportunity to earn the Global Competence Certificate. So this was kind of a new twist on it. It was not just the Global Competence Certificate, which I'll explain in a moment, we had been doing for a few years, but it was really oriented to the heritage language speakers who would be in our program. So what is that? First of all, I'll just give you a quick background on that. It is actually recognized as one of the kind of models for a globaledcertificate.org. And we originally developed it with our international schools leadership team in Seattle in around 2016, 2017. And the first year we piloted it, it was the first time we ever used Zoom, just by chance that had come about at that time. And so we administered it remotely, and we had about a dozen students who participated from Seattle and other school districts, and 2 were awarded that certificate. And we decided the design of it included offering a portfolio that they would then present. And if you go to this one, this was the first student who was presented, and she was a senior, so it was a pretty sophisticated one. She was also a student at Lakeside High School, which is quite well known in our area. So what are the components of the Global Competence Certificate? We designed that. We spent some time really investigating, researching lots of models for global competence certificates. A lot of those were done in the international schools that Asia Society was starting, but we tailored ours we felt to best meet our audience. And in that, if you go back to that Google Doc, you'll see there's a place where you can put your questions. That would really help me, because then I can go back and look at that during the presentation, but I can also go back afterwards and answer them for you. So if you go into the Google Doc, maybe I'll just take a quick moment to show you what that looks like. Oh. that's right. I didn't need to leave. I just needed to go to my other, I needed to escape, sorry. Always trying to find the best way to get in and out of, why doesn't it want to escape? Okay, there we go. So if you go back to this Google Doc down here, this section right here, if you just take that link from the table of contents, feel free to enter questions, because it is, anytime you deal with a project of this sort, there's a lot of pieces to it. And so it's helpful perhaps for you to have a chance to ask some questions about it. I think I will, since I'm here, take just a moment to just share that with you. I'm going to share the Global Competence Certificate first, and then I'll talk about it in the context of the Heritage Language Grant. So this is what we set up back in 2020 when we started offering it during COVID. And we had some background about how we set it up, talked about the different components. There's an overview video that you can see. There's a couple of videos about how to build your website. And then there's some resources that tell about getting started and so on. And then there's some example portfolios, and we're going to be looking at some of these in a little bit more detail. But the idea is that it has these three components. So I'll just take a quick look at these. You're able to see these pages okay, right, on website?
Yes.
Thank you. Great. Okay, so getting started with global learning, we kind of talk about what do we mean by global learning. So in our context, we are using that matrix, the Global Competence Matrix, as the framework. It has 4 domains that investigate the world, recognize perspectives, communicate ideas, and take action. And this coming Monday, we're actually doing a workshop for the teachers in this program and other teachers in Washington and the students to learn more about that particular model and aspects. But to get them started, you can see the kinds of questions that you might be asking yourself. Like, have you ever researched an important issue like climate change or poverty or so on? Have you ever thought about how you might feel about an issue, but how somebody else might as well? That's recognized perspectives. Have you thought about how to communicate something? Do you write a letter? Do you make a brochure? Do you make a video? And have you ever engaged in some type of service project where you're taking action on something that matters to you? So those are the 4 pillars that go into this thing. Virtually, you can still do a lot of things in this area. And one huge resource is the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which I can talk about in more detail in a little bit. Another example, the World Citizen Essay Contest through the World Affairs Council is something where you can explore an issue, for example, and then write about it and so on. And then there are lots of events. I'll talk more about those in a minute. The second component is what we call international engagement. So have you ever traveled? What is your experience engaging with diverse cultures, communities, places potentially? It could be from traveling abroad. It might be from studying a language or doing service work or engaging in international exchange. Obviously, some students have had a lot of travel experience or connecting with relatives that are in another country. But our goal was that the Global Competence Certificate would be something that any student really could take on and would not be limited by having been a heritage learner. So it's not limited. This Global Competence Certificate is not limited to heritage language speakers, could be for anybody for that matter. So getting them thinking about that, and then just thinking about, oh, here you are stuck at home in the middle of COVID. How can you do global yet local experiences and maybe do them virtually as well? So even if you just visited an Asian grocery store and thought about what could I buy there, and then reflected on why the choices are different and so on. And then the third area, the language and intercultural learning, that component. Sorry, let me go back to this page. That's the one where language is really infused. So whatever experience you have had with your own language, with learning another language, And we wanted students, even if they were in schools where they could only have like maybe a year or two of Spanish, or maybe they'd never had formal instruction in language, they could still potentially earn this global competence certificate. So you might talk about people that you know that have another language and get to know or try something a little bit, experiment with learning a language with Duolingo or something like that, or comment on when you visited certain parts of town if you've noticed signs in different languages. But obviously, for a lot of students, they will have multiple languages and very in-depth experiences. So this component can be super rich. And here are some of the resources that we offer to them to think about that. All right, so I'm going to go back to slideshow. That just gives you a quick overview of, yes. So part of how we knew, I think I told you about the, let's see, let me just, yeah, okay. So it has these three main components. There's also an About Me page that is also an opportunity for students to think about how they want to present themselves to the world and share about their experiences. And that's also another component. Okay, so why did we think it would be relevant to heritage language speakers? Well, we had some experience of this because after we initially piloted this in 2016, 2017, our teacher, our dual language, which was also a heritage language teacher at Chief Sealth International High School in Seattle, had been using it with his IB students. So after they took IB exams, they had a little time at the end of the year. And so this was a project that they could engage with. And I had, when they made their formal presentations, I had gone there to view them. I was very impressed with how much it resonated and sort of was like a capstone in a sense for their experience as heritage language speakers, but also dual language students in a dual language program where they had for periods of their life, a fair portion, at least 2 classes in middle and high school and half the day in Spanish from the time that they were quite young. And so I believed it would be effective for heritage speakers. The thing that actually really convinced us was, though, our first taker in spring of 2020 was a student named Santoshi, who was a heritage speaker of Telugu and Hindi, but was learning Spanish. And she came to one of our information sessions, and then she came back 2 weeks later with her portfolio and said, well, am I on the right track? And so, yes, you're on the right track. So we've used her a lot. And we saw that in her language portfolio, she highlighted all of those languages. So it made us realize that she felt very at home to have a context in which to present herself that was friendly to that kind of thing. We didn't ask how many years of a language did you study in school. We didn't ask, do you have AP to X test results? We didn't even ask what your proficiency level is for the purposes of this global competence certificate. So she could honestly share that Telugu is her mother language, but she doesn't know how to write it or read it, but Hindi she does. So these were things that suggested that this could work. So why would it be relevant to them? And what we decided is that it would be relevant because it would allow the students participating in this program to explore and share their identity and language and intercultural and international experiences, while also delving into issues of global significance and high academic rigor. So it could appeal to people that might be wanting to be with their language more from a cultural point of view, but also students who are like very serious about they want to save the world and deal with climate change. It had all of those essence, all those images. Also, because of the creative aspect, creating a website with text and images and video was very artistic. And of course, working in the web environment by its very nature is iterative. You just put out a draft and then you improve it some more. You decide to do this and that. And so a lot of students never get that opportunity in school. Even if you have drafts of a project you're doing, you turn them in, you get feedback, then it's the final. That's the final. Like you never go back and look at that paper that you wrote. But that's not how the real world acts. And that's why using a website was a good way to do that. And then because they would be presenting to our team from the World Affairs Council, it would give them an authentic experience of presentational communication, both the writing that they're presenting and the speaking when they would talk to it. So this is back August 2020. I should say, actually, a little bit earlier, I'm going to start with is June of 2020. And I'm going to tell you now about our first year of this Heritage Language Grant. So in June 2020, the Ethnic Heritage Council was holding its roundtable on heritage language, and several of us were talking about the kinds of things that you all are talking about here today, the importance of preserving and sharing ethnic heritage and language and so on. And a person from the State Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction was there, and she said, well, we have a heritage language grant for the first time. And I just want to mention, having just come from the JNCL Nicholas Language Advocacy Days, where we got to have one of the keynotes from Roxana Nourouzi, Persian speaker, heritage speaker, who was a keynote. And she was the person, the education leader at One America, when they really advocated for the dual language grants in our state to be expanded to heritage language and also indigenous languages. So a group of us decided, well, maybe we should apply. So these were the grants that the state offered. And part of the reason I'm going into this is that your state should be doing this too. And so if you're not getting grants like this that recognize heritage languages as just as important as any other language that's normally taught in the school day or any other subject area, you know that you can look to Washington for an example. So in the first year of this grant, they awarded $60,000. We did have to apply through a school district, and we applied through Evergreen Public Schools, which is a district in Vancouver, Washington, right near Portland. And we chose Russian because I personally had experience with it for a number of years with Star Talk, so I knew we had strong instructional pedagogy for heritage speakers. The Romanians had also become quite involved and were working on certification of, recognition with the global with the global seal of biliteracy, for example, with their schools. And then we added Spanish, of course, because it's such an important language among heritage speakers in Washington. So we applied, and then we got the grant. So we decided that we would partner, one of our key partners would be the World Affairs Council Global Classroom, and they are an excellent organization because they were already sponsoring the Global Competence Certificate. So that would be kind of the public context. And you can see that you would be joining a whole number of sponsors and partners who would be aware of this program and would find out that the students are presenting because they have such a breadth of programming already. So Ethnic Heritage Council, the Global Classroom, also the American Romanian Cultural Society, they were all partners in this effort. And this is how this grant came together. So you can see Russian, Spanish, Romanian, the new virtual course. So we decided, of course, that we would offer it virtually. And I'll talk about some of the benefits of that in just a moment. But we decided from the get-go. So we were heading into that direction. And I think I have yes, this describes what we put forward in our grant proposal to the state office, that it would be a project-based curriculum that would integrate content and functional language. It would be offered online, and it would be personalized to students' needs. Because one thing is that we wouldn't be able to just do a test and decide exactly that everybody was at the same level. Clearly, they wouldn't be. We know, especially communities that have not been well served, like Russian and Romanian, they have a huge variation in what the proficiency levels for students are. There are plenty of students that actually don't really have much proficiency at all because their families sort of abandoned their language because they were told they should do that by the schools. And over the year, so over an extended time, again, students would have opportunities to develop this global competence certificate through a whole range of experiences, some that would be their own experiences or even going back to things they'd done earlier in their lives in education, and some by things that were going to be newly offered through the program itself. So that was the proposal we put forward. Here's our team meeting in August 2020, trying to figure out what on earth are we going to do now. So we were so bright and shiny back then. So in our program, basically what we put out to students is that there are two goals for this program. We would like to prepare them to be able to put together, that would basically be their project, the Global Competence Certificate portfolio, and be able to present it to the World Affairs Council. We wanted them to put it into their heritage language to the extent that they could, and possibly bilingually or multilingually. Maybe they have other languages too. In addition, the language goal would be recognized through the competency-based credit testing, which is something we do in our state in our middle to high schools. And they could earn credits for high school credits for their language. And if they qualified, they could earn our state seal of biliteracy, but we would also submit for them to receive the global seal of biliteracy. So that one has certain advantages. So you can see that there's two goals. One is sort of the content experience, all the whole range of different learning experiences that would still be in the language. And then another is taking a proficiency assessment that would be able to qualify them for the global seal of biliteracy, which is fast becoming really an internationally recognized credential. So the idea of credentialing. So a couple things I'll say about the global seal, and maybe maybe we should stop for just a moment before we go to this part to see if there's any questions so far that I should answer. I'm going to stop share for a sec so I can look at you and check the chat and see if there's any questions I should answer right now.
Michelle, I have tons of questions.
Oh, great.
So for the global seal, the global competency is different from the global seal, correct?
Two different things. The global competence certificate is local. It's in our state, but you could do it anywhere. We're hoping to get other World Affairs Councils to do it, but it's based on that model of the portfolio and the website that you use as the basis of your presentation. The global seal is you can earn that by completing proficiency assessment in the language plus the evidence of English.
So the one that you instituted in your institution, which is locally based, let's just call it that way, is something that you structured using the seal as a model, or this is something that you all put together?
Oh, the global seal, the global seal is off the shelf. We already had in our state seal. And so pretty much any student that qualifies for our state seal would also qualify for the global seal. But the global seal has some other advantages, which I'm going to go into next. So I'll tell you more about the global seal in just a moment. I'm sorry.
Because this is something that this is in the conversations right now at our institution, but we don't seem to be so clear as to what is what, number one. Number two, we understand that this has to be accredited by state. And if Pennsylvania, I don't think has been accredited the global seal yet. So this is in the making because not all the states have the accreditation.
Right. But the global seal is like the frosting. You have the cake, which is your state seal. So whatever allows you to qualify for your state seal, you are likely to be able to qualify for the global seal as well. And the global seal is free. Somebody like the educational leaders have to submit your name and information, proof of your tests in order for you to qualify for that. So it's like the frosting on the cake.
I see.
For high school, I would say. It's different at university because there isn't any state seals for university generally.
Right. And so that's a transition that we're trying to figure out. So for the global seal, so they will have to do the assessment in two languages, English and in a foreign language. Is that correct?
Yes and no. So there's a whole range of ways to qualify for the English part. So in the past, most of our students in Washington qualified by virtue of graduating high school. If you met all the high school graduation requirements, then you qualified for English. You didn't have to take a separate test, or your state test could be used. However, during COVID, of course, a lot of state tests went out the window and so on. But for this grant, for several reasons, because we had younger students and we had heritage speakers, we wanted to make sure that we gave them the award as soon as possible. We didn't want them to wait till they were seniors. The global seal can be earned earlier. And so we simply had them all take an English stamp test, which is from Avant Assessment, Standards-Based Measurement of Proficiency, for the English part. So they were able to do that. And I have to say again, this was quite challenging year, middle of COVID 2020, 2021. So we did, Avant was offering their assessments with remote proctoring. And so the students that were able to complete the exams, most of them did it with remote proctoring. Some that were kind of clustered in a school were able to go in and test there.
And my last question, and I'll give the floor back to you, to whoever.
Yeah, and I can talk more about this one for sure. Yeah.
For marketing purposes, what would this, how will this look like in a student's resume? So say that he or she writes, you know, I have the biliteracy, the seal, and I have the other one. What does it mean to a company? What does it mean to the academe, that if he or she wants to continue with with a master's degree, or wants to get a job in the business world, or whatever?
Yes. I think I'm going to take that question. So keep it in mind. I'll take it more toward the end, and I'll kind of continue with our grant and then talk about that. Obviously, if I wasn't already convinced from my 10 years, 12 years now working on competency-based credits, and then, 7 years working on seal of biliteracy, if I wasn't already convinced that it was a valuable thing to do, I would not have proposed putting it into the grant at all. But I'm really quite confident that it will be extremely valuable, but I'll talk more about that. I'll give you more details on that front in just a moment. And as it happens, actually, there is another conference coming up on Thursday, Global Cred, that is really all about that. So we'll make sure to put information in about that. Thank you. Is there any other questions from the chat, or anybody that should be addressed right now? Because I'll kind of dive into the grant now. Okay. So, as I mentioned, the global seal of biliteracy, which is offered at no cost to receive the certificate, and we can go visit the website and look at it in more detail a little later in the program, has several advantages. We did want our students to earn the state seal of biliteracy. That's great, but a lot of them were not seniors, so that would be several years off. So you can't claim that they have the state seal of biliteracy, say on a college application, until they're seniors, which is a bit late for that. So the global seal was more valuable for us from that point of view. So they had to qualify. There's 2 levels. There's actually more than 2 levels, but the ones that are probably relevant to high school students are overall intermediate mid-level, or functional fluency, as it's called on the global seal. And that is also the same level for our state seal. Some state seals of biliteracy have a higher level, like intermediate high, but intermediate mid is the level in our state, and I'd say the majority of states. But a lot of our heritage speakers can get to advanced level. And so being able to get the further recognition that they were at working fluency at overall advanced low was a plus as well. So this basically, you could say, they didn't really have to do anything for the program to just go and test and see where they're at. Some students probably already were. If they just arrived in country 2 years ago, and if they had English that was adequate, then they could just go test and they could earn this one. This, on the other hand, for many students, the things they needed to do to bring up their proficiency to potentially get to especially the higher level, was exactly what we were asking them to do by doing the Global Competence Certificate. So in a sense, the Global Competence Certificate is how they got to what, and the what was the Global Seal of Biliteracy. So I'm, again, just speaking about the program in the first year of the grant. Obviously, we had some big challenges, but also opportunities. Since we're in the middle of global COVID-19 pandemic, the classes couldn't meet in person. But we didn't have that many students, like 20. We were aiming for 20 in each of the languages. We didn't have necessarily that many in that same age range in one location for Russian and Romanian. They're very much sprinkled around in different schools, different districts, and so on. And so it turned out that we were able to attract way more students to participate and benefit because we were offering throughout the state. Another challenge was trying to do 3 languages in one program. But when you actually have more languages, the teachers get ideas from each other, and the students also get ideas from each other. They weren't meeting together in a class, but they went to information sessions, to award ceremonies, things like that. Some of the World Citizen Essay Contest would apply to all of them, and so on. And then this was a big one. By the time we got to May and June of 2021, the students were really exhausted from all the remote learning at school. And so what we did is we just offered lots of choices and we made it as low stakes as we possibly could. So there were no grades or course credits for being in the program. They could earn, as I've explained before, they could earn world language credits by having test results that qualified them for credits or the state seal. We also gave them choices. You don't have to complete the test for the Global Seal of Biliteracy if you don't feel up to it at this point, because they would have to do it on their own time because they were doing it testing remotely. So there were some students that just didn't make it to get tested by the end of June. But for the Global Competence Certificate, we offered an extended time frame. So that was outside the grant. So basically it had to be outside of grant activities. But since the Global Competence Certificate was supported by the World Affairs Council, we just opened the door. And so we had a number of students that completed their Global Competence Certificate websites during the summer and the fall, and we met with them, and they were just marvelous to be able to see that. So the students really took, they really stuck to it. And so we're really excited about that part. We also had a lot of learning opportunities for students and teachers. So with the World Affairs Council, we offered workshops on the Sustainable Development Goals, the World Citizen Essay Contest. We realized when some of the students weren't sure where to start to build a website, we brought Santoshi back and got a recording of her just talking about how she built her Google site, for example. But for the Heritage Language Grant, the state was offering monthly professional learning community meetings for all the recipients of the Heritage Language Grant. So we got to present and share. We also got to learn from them. We also had a lot of check-ins with our team, which were always enjoyable and interesting to give guidance and so on. And we made a number of presentations, including the first Global Cred Conference in December of 2020. So I just have to say, I think our team came to love each other and care about Romanian, Russian, and Spanish all together because we were in this new thing that we were doing. I should say perhaps that the Russian and Romanian instructors were primarily university level instructors who were teaching high school heritage speakers outside of the school setting. So they were not certificated as K-12 teachers. The Spanish instructors were working in districts and they were working with students more during the school day, although again, a lot of the learning time had been virtual during that year. So we brought our culminating program, I think the day before the grant had to be finished. If you've been on grants before, you know how that is. It's like it's got a deadline and you can't spend money after that. So we held our ceremony by Zoom, of course, and that was exciting. But I noted that I'll share some results, but these were updated as of September when we had additional students who completed the Global Competence Certificate. So everybody who participated got this certificate from us. I know it's not like some big thing that's on your transcript, but I think if you submitted this to a college, it would still be very impressive that all of these organizations had been part of supporting you to make this effort. So this was really based on just participating in the program. In addition, here's our Washington Seal of Biliteracy. We had 13 Romanian, 7 Russian, and 5 Spanish who qualified for 4 competency-based credits for their high school transcripts in Washington and for our Washington State Seal of Biliteracy. They qualified as proficient. Of course, as I mentioned, they don't earn the seal in Washington until they graduate. And we would have undoubtedly had more, but a lot of the students were using district computers, and they really weren't able to get arrangements to get the remote testing. So hopefully they'll have a chance to come back and test. And most of them could take the tests in their own school setting because that's what the schools do in Washington. So that they would have that opportunity again. So we also had 21 who got the Global Seal of Biliteracy from a whole variety of school districts around the state. And you can see that 6 earned it at the working fluency. To do that, that meant both their English and their Russian, Romanian, or Spanish had to be advanced, overall advanced low. In other words, none of the component scores could be less than. You can't be like, I'm a great speaker, but I can't write, or I can write, but I don't speak well. No, everything had to be at advanced low or higher. So that's very impressive when you see that. And so we're excited about that as well. And some students didn't choose to do the English test, so they weren't able to be submitted for the global competence, for the Global Seal of Biliteracy. So one of the big things we wanted to do was to share the work of the students and so on. So they did share at that ceremony. So in a moment, I'll step away from the PowerPoint and we'll be able to look at Heritage Language Voices, which we set up as a starting place for sharing different projects or work that the students were doing. And that includes many of the students who have been presenting their global competence certificates have agreed to let us post their links to their websites on our Heritage Language Voices. So you'll be able to actually see what that looks like. The Russian students took on projects that were based on sustainable development goals. And so they also made presentations, and you can see those on that website as well. Some of them, again, not all the students agreed to have their work posted. We'll do more this year, I'm sure. I'm just going to share, I don't know if it's clear enough to read this, but this was one of the students who was one of Pedro's students who had been, as she says here, she started in 6th grade, that particular pathway of dual language schools or programs in Southwest Seattle. Has a lot of Spanish-speaking students who didn't go to the elementary, but were able to start at the Immersion program. They call it Immersion rather than dual language there in 6th grade. So she'd been all these years, and she just talks about that. It's, that she's taking Spanish classes and history in Spanish. In the high school, they did world history, global leadership, IB history of the Americas, all in Spanish, as well as Spanish language arts classes and AP Spanish and IB Spanish. So they had a lot of different avenues. She says, I went from not knowing how to write, read, and speak well to one of the top in the class. I've been in the program now for 6 years. I've been able to learn about different cultures and compare and contrast. This program has been successful for me. It has helped me improve my Spanish and use it in my daily life. Now I'm able to read my favorite books in Spanish, send texts in Spanish, and overall I have better comprehension. And it's pushed her to learn other languages. I've always thought that it's important to learn one's own language first before learning others. There will always be ways to improve, but I'm ready to learn new ways. So she's reflecting on her experience in her school-based program, dual language or immersion that she had, but she's writing about it in her global competence certificate. And as you see, she made hers bilingual. So she had what she wrote in Spanish, and then she also provided a version in English so that people like me who don't read Spanish that well have a chance to understand. And you'll be able to see hers. Here was one of the presentations by a Russian student, how life changed for people in Russia and the United States during the year of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so this was all presented in Russian. They did surveys and it was all written up. It was a pretty extensive report. So that's something that most heritage speakers don't have an opportunity to do, like an academic research paper or project like that can be then shared. Let's see, I'm not sure I shared with sound, so I'm going to go back and share with that because I would like to play this little video from Louisa Turner, who is from Evergreen School Districts. Sorry, I didn't test this earlier. I hope it works. Okay, here it comes. It's very short. This is Michele Anciaux Aoki with the Heritage Language Grant through Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction in Evergreen School District. And I have Louisa Turner with me here, who has led our Spanish group of students at Evergreen working on the grant this year. Louisa was just going to tell me a few words about what it's meant to our students to have the opportunity to be part of this program.
Hi, Michelle. Yes, I'm so excited to be able to, first of all, to work with the students this year. Such a challenging year, but at the same time, I'm so glad that the kids or our students had the opportunity to live this experience. And not only that, they can get a certificate. The thing is, they can be themselves. They can express themselves. They can show who they are and how proud they are of their heritage, their culture, their language. And it's been, for me, it's such a eye-opening for me, because sometimes we don't think about how the students feel when they are talking about a project or doing homework, I will say it like this. But as you hear the students saying, I feel different, I feel proud, I feel confident after working in this project, believe me, is such a rewarding thing to do and to be a part of it.
Okay. And then Pedro was the instructor from Seattle, from Chief Sealth International High School. So what happened is that the legislature refunded, and not only that, but ESSER money came into the state, and they were able to offer 2 years of the grant. We just found out last week that that Wenatchee had applied for 2 years. So we're with the new school district this year, but otherwise it's a similar model. However, we also found out in the last 2 weeks that there's an increasing number of Ukrainian students who are English learners in our state, and there was a lot of interest in offering something for them. And so they've just offered us some additional funds to extend to Ukrainian. So we're just in the process of finding an instructor who will be able to do that. As I mentioned on Tuesday, we're actually having a workshop, our first real workshop, content workshop with the World Affairs Council on global competence from the student perspective. So in this workshop, we'll be focusing in on that one aspect of the Global Competence Certificate around global learning and the Global Competence Matrix. And Santoshi will be coming to present about her certificate and her portfolio. And we'll also be sharing a lot of the things from the website, the Heritage Language Voices. And so you're welcome to come to that, since everything's virtual these days. So feel free if you're interested. We're trying to really make sure that all of our instructors are fully aware of how important it is for us to focus on the students' voices and their perspectives and giving them opportunities. So it's a slightly different way of doing a content and course, because it's not like, oh, you have to cover certain grammar points, or you have to read certain items of literature, or you have to write certain kinds of papers. It's very diverse what they do. And so it's sort of like creative dancing, you could say, in a sense. It's not like it's formulaic. It's like, you know how to do the waltz, for example, and there's a million ways to do it. So we're going to take a moment to maybe look at a few examples from the Heritage Language Voices of students' web pages, and I will go to those sites in just a moment. And what I want you to think about now and maybe ask questions about in that Google Doc or when we're talking here is remembering what I said we felt we had learned from all of our years of our Heritage Language Symposium and endless numbers of wonderful workshops with Maria and everyone else. Did we succeed in that? And I think we felt that we did. I mean, not that it's perfect and we always have more work to do, but we feel like we're on the right track. So that's really how we came full circle. Here's the contact information for our various languages. I didn't update this yet to add that actually we have another Spanish teacher who's joined us, who's Brandon, who I believe is still here. And he's going to be doing the program with his online school in Tacoma, which should be really exciting. So let me just show you where this, I'll show you a couple of websites, and then I'm going to step back and we'll have a chat. And you can also go back and pose more questions if you'd like. So I showed you where the Global Competence Certificate website is. On this same International EDWA, the Heritage Language Grant, there is a brief page for each language that describes the grant and the things that who's participating and so on. On the students page, it answers a lot of the questions that we got when they first started. For example, what is the Global Competence Certificate? Why should I want to earn it? And so, as I mentioned, there are a number of states and international schools around the country that are offering this type of credentialing for completion, usually it's tied with completing high school. Ours is kind of independent of that, but we're the only state on the West Coast doing it, and we're only one doing it in a multilingual format. But we believe this is going to grow and expand. And one of our goals is to reach out to World Affairs Councils throughout the country to see if they would like to accept our model and offer it in other states as well. This is kind of what it looks like. You see there's an about page and about me, for example, global learning experiences, international engagement, languages and intercultural experiences. And these are, why does global competence matter? And this comes actually from that website, Global Ed Certificate. It's necessary for employability, for living cooperatively in multicultural communities, for young people to communicate and learn effectively and responsibility. And if we have a goal in this world of achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we're going to need to be multilingual and globally competent in order to do that. Then there's some more concrete ones. It doesn't appear on your transcript because it's not offered by the state. However, you should certainly have your own resume, and that should include a reference to it. The seal of biliteracy, we talk about that in relation to the state seal and the competency-based credit testing. Some students are not fully aware of that opportunity in our state. And then we talk about how the global seal is different from the state seal and why it would be beneficial. It's a broader credential. You can earn it before high school, multiple levels, and you can actually get college credits for it. There's a college that you can purchase the credits. They're not very expensive. So if you want to get some college transfer credits, you can do that. And as we mentioned, it is a website, and we do expect students to do it in that format. But they don't have to make it public if they don't want to. And then we talk a little bit about the structure of the program. So most of the languages we're meeting via Zoom once a week, and then there might be additional consulting time, office hours, especially as people were trying to perfect their language for their global competence certificate and so on. They might like to have, edit their documents that they're creating and so on. There were many interviews with professionals, exploration of global issues, hearing from interesting speakers, meetings, cultural activities, things like that. But they were all unique to the time and place and language, in a sense, what was happening, what was real at that time. They're not like pre-canned things. And then travel, well, we didn't travel. It would have been nice, but we didn't travel. Now, this is the site that I mentioned. It's not like a perfected site because we're hoping that students will engage this year in making it more attractive, but it's our heritage language voices, and specifically for this grant. So if you go to the Global Competence Certificate blog, then you'll see entries for 4 of the students who had agreed to have their Global Competence Certificates shared. Seems like it's taken a while to get there. Okay, so Evelyn, for example, so if you click on the link, then you'll be able to go and actually see that. Alex Iliescu, Adriana, and Alexa Figueroa, I probably not pronouncing that correctly. So in her case, there's a link to her website, and there's also a recording of her presentation. So that's really interesting to hear. And I believe, actually, Adriana, I was going to show just a little bit about her presentation. I'll just show you her website briefly, but each of the websites is different depending on which web tool they used and how they approached it. She did hers quite bilingually, as you can see. And so in this section on language and interculturality, she had it in both languages and talked about that. She had shared something that's not there now. And let me go back to Adriana. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to share a little bit of her presentation about how she approached the global learning, the global competence matrix, the domain of investigate the world.
We were assigned in our Romanian heritage class to talk about a topic involving Romania. And at the time, it was like when the year had first kicked off, and it was when I was first in the program. And so I didn't really, I still wasn't really used to experiencing so much Romanian, like like at the same time. So I wanted to sort of talk about something that I was familiar with that was also Romanian at the same time. So I chose to do a presentation on Romanian Impressionist painters. And what you'll see here is a bunch of paintings by the same artist. His name is Nicolae Grigorescu. This is my favorite painting like ever, and it's by him. It's like one of my favorite artworks ever. And here is the presentation I made. So you'll see slides. So the first one is by Nicolae. And he studied in France as an artist, and then he worked as like a painter to paint, I guess, like snapshots of the Romanian independence revolution. And then these are some other artists, Ion Andreescu and Stefan Lucian, who I did not research as much about, so I don't remember as much about, but Stefan Lucian and Nicolae Grigorescu, they did know each other, which I thought was kind of cool. So I think that being able to investigate the world, a lot of that is about investigating it in your own way and in your own manner through things that interest you specifically. I've never been as impacted by learning about Romanian engineers or scientists or politicians because that stuff does not apply as heavily to like what I'm interested in. I really like learning about the writers and the painters and the artists of history. And I think that that's just something that everyone can do because it makes investigating the world a lot easier and a lot more personal. I think it was really cool to see people from my culture doing the things that I like because it just made it like a lot more connected. For the recognized perspectives, we were given the task of finding
I'm going to just take a quick look to see if there are no questions yet, it looks like, and unless that I just haven't seen them. So I'm going to stop share, and I think I will just open questions.
Thank you, Michelle.
Oh, I can look over the chat and see if there's some things.
Yes, Joy had several questions.
Yes, they can get all of those things. Not only that, they can get credits. So like if Spanish students are probably getting credits no matter what, because they got Spanish classes, but Russian or Romanian, for example, they can get up from 1 to 4 credits. The vast majority earn 4 credits based on reaching overall intermediate mid proficiency on their transcript high school credits, which are also used then for college admissions. They can earn the state seal when they graduate high school. They got the global seal of biliteracy and the global competence certificate.
Wow.
Wow, that's amazing. And do any kids from community-based schools do these?
Absolutely.
In Washington, they can do all of them too.
A lot of the Romanian students are in the ARCS program, but that was one of the things that developed. ARCS had been a place-based school, so all the students had to live in the Seattle area to go to their Saturday schools, right? But now they could take students who are Moldovan or Romanian speakers from all over the state to be in this program. And now they've started offering all of their language programs remotely, and they're taking students from all over the country now.
Wow, that's really something. Whew. Thank you. Wow, really
and Brandon,
exciting.
I wonder if you want to share a little bit, because Brandon's just joined us like within the last several weeks to have some of his students, because he's got a new work assignment now. So tell them some about what you're thinking about, or what you're asking, the questions you're asking me and things like that.
Sorry, I missed that. I didn't know if I was. You want me to like give a quick summary of how I've become involved with this, like our
Sure.
situation?
Yeah.
So this is, it's actually really convenient. I'm in an online school by design. It was born of the pandemic, but my district, which is a public district, a public school, we created an online school. So a lot of things that used to be hard are now really easy. So I alluded to it earlier in our earlier breakout. Our critical mass to start a heritage class was 1. We needed 1 student and 1 teacher that was willing to start a heritage class. And I asked my admin, hey, can we do a heritage class? And they're like, yeah, do it. So I thought, well, a really natural thing for us to do was to jump on with this grant. And you know, like things like meetings with students from around the state, because some of the students that are on the grant are like a 3-hour drive away, and that's if there's not a lot of snow on the pass. And so we can meet with them though if we just email links to each other. And so I thought that, yeah, I definitely want my students involved in this. The class that they were taking is not serving them. They were in traditional Spanish classes, and not really even great ones at that. And so I thought, yeah, let's do a certificate. Let's build a portfolio. I think the portfolio that's kind of like the basis for this grant is something that should be in a lot more classes. We should be doing more portfolios that follow students throughout, you know, so that the projects that we assign to them in any class and any content doesn't just like die in that class. You know, a lot of times we ask a student to do a thing and then it lands on our desk and then it goes back to the student's desk and then it goes to the recycling bin. But an online portfolio can live with a student from, you know, from the year that they start in a district to the year that they graduate. So I'm really excited about this, and asking students better questions and starting to dabble a little bit more in project-based learning. Like I got some really good ideas from you earlier about the translating the newsletter, and then like sending out the voice recordings for it. Like that's a real need in our community. We have a weekly newsletter. As far as I know, Google Translate is that's who we're contracting with right now to do that. So I see some really cool opportunities for our heritage learners. And we so far we only have, I think we'll have a third if there's still room for them. I just got one more heritage learner to come into this class, and that's before some like serious recruiting next week. But we're gonna build these portfolios. We're gonna take, you know, all the expertise we can soak up from the teachers that have been in this grant for a bit, that you've talked about, Michelle. And obviously we're, you know, I've got a whiteboard above the computer that I'm talking to you on that's just full of notes that I took from our conversation the other day about the way that this can all be structured. So I feel like I maybe talked around a little bit. That wasn't a ton of concrete information. Do you feel like I adequately spoke to what you were asking?
What you said is perfect. So
Okay.
yeah, so this is fine. So this is for high school students, and we're going to have some middle school students too, 8th grade. But what I really want to do is get this into higher ed, especially the community colleges. And so this global seal of biliteracy, anybody can earn. In fact, we've got a whole nother initiative for teachers to get it because, you know, many of them haven't got some kind of recent credential that speaks to that. The first teacher that signed up for that actually is a Japanese teacher who's been learning Mandarin. And so she signed up to take stamp tests for all of the languages, English, Spanish, and English, Chinese, and Japanese. She got the Japanese and at the advanced low, as you would expect for being a teacher, and qualified for the global seal of biliteracy. But she was getting close in Chinese. So she talked to her students about what it felt like to be testing in a language she's just learning, is not very far on, compared to one that she's known for a long time. So that was extremely powerful. But I found out that the University of Washington is actually now using stamp tests for a lot of placement decisions for students. So Avant has told me that probably 40% of the students that have tested would qualify for the global seal of biliteracy if anybody told them that they did. And so I see this as fertile ground too, as you know, to get students in higher ed interested in an external credential besides I had 3 years of Russian or something like that. And then ideally, the Global Competence Certificate could be something you kind of start as a freshman and it just evolves. Maybe you did it in high school and you keep evolving it, and there's many opportunities to come and share it and bring it back to other settings. So it doesn't, I mean, the real value of it is the experience of doing it. You know, it's not that you got a grade for it, or that you, in fact, that's exactly what we don't want. We don't want it associated with a traditional thing like a grade. But the students responded so well to doing these things. And we give feedback. We give them a lot of detailed feedback. You saw there was like 4 of us listening to the presentation. That was in English because, you know, some of us were not Spanish or Romanian speakers, but in the classes, they were presenting parts of what they were preparing, obviously, in the heritage language. So I see we're at 1:30. I think, did you delay by 5 minutes or? Okay, good. So are there any more questions?
Maria, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. So I have a couple comments and then a question. Actually, I think they might be all comments. I love what Brandon said about portfolios. And let me say, it's also possible to revisit the portfolio as you're leveling up. So the same assignment can be redone better and better, right? I also wanted to, I second Michelle's comment about this being important for higher ed too, right? Super important. You can take it out there when you're looking for a job, and I'm sure it counts for a lot. And Michelle, I have a suggestion for a future grant for your group. You need to put together a group of experts that can guide specific schools that want to institute this kind of program, and not just in your state, but in other places, so we can multiply this opportunity, which strikes me as so important. So think about that, because I think it would be done really, it could be really good if you follow up on everything and provide ongoing mentorship.
Yeah, no, that's true. Of course, you realize I'm retired, right?
I don't realize that, no.
No, I do think that's a huge opportunity, and I would be just delighted to mentor the younger people who would take on that project for sure. I think we've proved the point, and actually it's great that we just heard in this last 2 weeks that we will be able to have our grant for a second year, because now it'll be the third year actually, but with a different district, because it's a lot of it's just the startup kinds of things that take time. But there's also some open educational resource grants in Washington that I think we could apply for, so we could maybe have some additional funds for someone just to focus on getting the materials all gathered and onto the OER hub so that everybody could borrow them and use them easily, right? I mean, we've got a lot of stuff in Canvas right now, but like I just didn't have the time to try to get it all organized and taken out and so on. But, again, one of the things I love about this is that we can just, since we don't depend like on a textbook or something, we can add a language tomorrow, which is just what happened with Ukrainian. And I feel like what could be more important than to tell our Ukrainian students, we see your language. Maybe you speak Russian and would like to do Russian. That's great. You could do both languages, but you should never have to deny that Ukrainian is the home language, the mother language that you identify with. Even if you don't speak it or write it or read it very well, you should have this opportunity. So anyway, I'm excited about that. So if you have more questions, feel free to go back to the Google Doc and I will go check them and respond to them. And, there's a wealth of things to be brought into this. I've been doing this work around global competence for quite a long time with the international schools and all. And I really, really believe in the value of meaningful, impactful content as a vehicle for motivation to take a language further.
Thank you, Michelle. Any more questions or last comments? Well, Michelle and Maria, I know that you said that you're going to retire or you're retired, but women like you cannot retire. You still, we still need you.
Joy is another one in this.
Joy. No, you cannot retire. I'm so sorry. But thank you so much. So we're going to take a break for 45 minutes. We're returning 11:15 Pacific Standard Time and the East Coast 2:15, right? Yes.
Right. And before we go off for lunch or whatever it is you're going to do, I want to congratulate Michelle on this excellent work and thank her for sharing with us all this wonderful information and inspiring us to do the same. To the rest, thank you, Michelle. And then to the rest of you, as those of you that were here at the beginning know, we were bombed at the very beginning. So please, if you can help it, don't sign off. Stay on Zoom because it just became overwhelming to have to deal with all of a sudden shutting everything down and having to restart it and then trying to figure out who was legit and who wasn't. So thank you. Of course, if you need to log off for a while, we understand. But if you don't need to, it'd be great if you would just stay on. Thank you and enjoy your break. Thank you, Alejandro.
Maria, stop recording.
Thank you, Michelle.